Good afternoon, folks. Ian, can you check it? People on link, can you hear? Can one of you write a message for Ian, who's checking for us? Excellent. Okay. I've got so many things to tell you. I had to write them on a list. Forgive me if I'm looking at a bit of paper or I forget any of them. First of all, this is an important message for anyone who works or volunteers at Friends of the Earth. There are lots of people here who don't work or volunteer at Friends of the Earth, so you have to be on your best behaviour or I'm going to come back and trace you. Please be good. Second of all, thanks very much for coming. This is the second in our series of lunchtime talks, thinking about digital things. Last week we had Andrew Sheldon come in and talk to us about the Hear Me MP app, the app that you can use to lobby your MP. This week I'm really pleased that Branislava is joining us. She used to be the digital manager at CAFOD and Save the Children, if I've remembered that part right. And since then she's become an independent digital consultant. So she's worked over the past few years with senior managers and digital managers to try and help them, I guess, embed best practice, to seize opportunities, and to kind of develop capabilities across the not-for-profit sector. So I'm really, really pleased she's here. I'm going to hand over to her in a minute. She's going to talk to us for roughly half an hour. And then we've got some time for Q&A. So the other things I need to tell you are that we're recording this session. We're going to try and turn it into a podcast. So for those people who couldn't make it today, we'll try and turn it into an MP4 file and share it on YouTube, and you can share it around. The other thing is just to say that linked to this is essentially part of our digital first strand, which are the reasons for the slides behind me. Essentially, Friends of the Earth strand of work to try and embed better digital skills, more effective ways of working, all about transforming what we do to make life on this planet better for everyone. I'm going to stop waffling. I think I've covered my whole list. Thank you for coming. Brani, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hello. So what I'm talking about today, sorry, I'm going to have to coordinate the slides because the clicker doesn't work. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about digital transformation. As Tom was saying, as a consultant, both working in organizations, but also as a consultant for the past 3 years, I've been trying to help organizations to go through the process of digital transformation. So I'm just trying to share some experience with you on that, and then we're going to have a discussion at the end. But before we start, does anyone want to volunteer your own definition of what digital transformation is? You can just shout out. Or shall we touch on that? Oh, go ahead.
This might go wildly wrong. Brandon, can you pass? So, last thing, people in the room, if you're talking, you need to use your microphone, because otherwise people on link can't hear you. So, if this one doesn't microphone.
It works. It works.
I broke it.
You need to speak very close.
Yeah, okay, cool. Is digital transformation about making organizations more nimble and able to adapt to changing customer expectations?
Any others? Okay, let's rattle on. It's probably going to be easier for the people on the link if we just do a bit of less interaction. Shall we... Right. So before I start talking about digital transformation, I just want to explain what I mean by digital with capital D. So just so that you get the context of where I'm coming from. So first of all, digital is not just a website. It's not just techie things like CMS and the database and the hosting, etc. And it's not just Twitter. And the reason why I have a need to say this is because a lot of the times I notice that when people are talking about digital, their understanding of what this thing is usually on one of these levels. So it's basically all about the website, it's all about tech, it's all about Twitter. So the other thing about digital as well with capital D, the way I define it is that it's actually an ecosystem of different digital channels. This picture on the right, I don't know if you can see it, but it's basically a mess. And that is a planner from one of the agencies ages ago tried to figure out what are all these different digital things that are out there. So there's like a mix of photo websites. It's an old picture. You will see stuff that is not necessarily as popular today. So there's a lot of stuff out there. and it's a mix of platforms, user experience, content. So it's not just the technology. There is actually the whole culture that's formulating around it, and that is, I suppose, what I feel is important to understand. That it's not just about technology. It's not just about websites, Twitter. There's actually the whole culture that's formulating around it, which is how we behave, how we share, how we interact with each other. So, talking about digital transformation. So what happened in the past, as you know? So this is probably, you recognize what this is. Kodak used to be, if you're my age, used to be one of the main ways of taking photos. It was producing films for cameras, photo cameras. No more. Basically, it's gone. The reason why it's gone is because it didn't recognize what was happening in the market, that our mobile phones are going to become cameras, and that the usual consumer cameras are going to become obsolete. Wikipedia is like, or rather, Encyclopedia Britannica used to be a big thing. My dad used to have the whole shelf full of the Encyclopedia Britannica bounded in leather. 2010, it stopped publishing in print because things like Wikipedia and the internet, where people can find information that before was just something you can find in encyclopedias, have challenged the traditional market and created a different user experience and user behavior. Then we have this, and this is what's happening on in terms of phones and mobile is probably the most interesting one. So as you probably, some of you will remember those kind of phones that we had where you have to kind of dial. Then came the mobile phone. I didn't do the kind of brick version from the 80s, but this is kind of Nokia was very popular at the time. What mobile phone was giving us is an opportunity to speak wherever we are. Then it became a camera, then it became a messaging service, and now we have all these different apps and different ways of interacting, like WhatsApp, and now WhatsApp is introducing video calls as well as audio calls, etc. So this kind of market has changed really dramatically from what it used to be, which is just a phone where you can phone a certain number. And then the world of news media is also changing. So you probably know that The Independent stopped publishing in print earlier this year, and Sun dropped the paywall in December last year because of the challenge of the new kids on the block like BuzzFeed, Vice, and Huffington Post. So you will see the slide that is from Ofcom, which basically shows that when it comes to most most visited news websites, Vice, Huffington Post, and BuzzFeed are above the Sun and getting closer, kind of going up that list of most visited news sites. So the market is changing. Have you seen this infographic before? Some of you have. So it's a really interesting thought. What this is showing is basically talking about these new new companies which actually don't own what they sell. So you have Facebook, which is the biggest content owner and content seller, so to say, but doesn't own any content. It's using our content, the content of organizations who are marketing on it. You have Uber, which doesn't own cars and doesn't really employ it doesn't own cars, but is the biggest cab company in the world. And then we have Airbnb, which doesn't own any hotels or any B&Bs. Actually, they're just kind of helping people exchange their own flats with each other. So these are, again, trends, and you will, no doubt, you have heard the question of what is the charity Uber, what is this kind of trend doing to charities, what is, and a lot of other companies are really thinking about what are these kind of trends, what is the impact on their own business model. And then on top of all that, we have this is I think this was again earlier this year, an article that our attention span is now less than that of a goldfish. Apparently, goldfish attention span is 9 seconds, and ours is 7. So what that means is not that people are not taking on the information you're giving them, it just means that they're multitasking, so the way they're engaging with information is different, so they're making decisions of what they're going to engage with much quicker than before, and that is really what we need to take from that. So just taking like a breath for a minute. So what all these examples show you is how digital culture and digital market has changed traditional industries. And as we know, charities are traditional industries in its own way. Some of the charities are 70, 80 years old. And we haven't really changed how we do things much in some areas of our activities. So it's definitely something we need to start thinking about. This is a model that is used to explain what digital transformation is. So the 3 bubbles are, basically the definition goes, something I found online, that digital transformation is an intersection of customer experience or audience experience, staff experience, and business transformation. So I'll give you some examples what that means. So in terms of audience and customer experience, the idea is that more personalized, more targeted, more timely, relevant information is going to result in more engagement and people being devoted to a single brand. It's also a trend, and it's also an expectation. So even if we are not selling shoes or TVs or equipment as charities, the expectation is there is a certain expectation of how things work online. So if and this is where digital culture is relevant. So if everyone around us, if in the market around us, we are getting emails from retailers that make sense to us, that are relevant to us, if the whole behavior and the whole experience online is in a certain way, it inevitably becomes expected from charities as well. One of the best examples is when in the UK we have a fairly very well developed shopping experience, purchasing experience, i.e. literally going from like buying something to paying it with a card. So the expectation is that that's going to happen on charity website when you're donating. So if you have a dodgy experience, you're just going to think something's wrong. So that's nothing to do really with the values or anything. It's just basically if something doesn't work the way you expected, you're just not going to use it. There is also something around staff experience, and there are examples. So this is mostly in industries. This is about staff effectiveness. So it's about making your life easier. And I'm sure a lot of you will have examples of having to fill in a form 5 times to say the same things to 3 departments in the organization, and actually it would have been much easier if there was one form that you fill in and the 3 departments can do their jobs. So that is kind of one part of the effectiveness thing. Another thing is, for example, one of my clients is doing some maintenance on canals. So one of the things that they developed is an app which helps people report when they completed the job, which before used to be like miles and miles of paperwork. Now it's just taking a photo and submitting it through an app. So it's making the job more effective and their life more easy. There's also there are also so I think I have some slides on. Have you heard of smart buildings? So especially for environmental organizations, this is interesting. So this is one example. You can't really see much, so I'll just kind of read out bits for you how they work. So this is implementation of something called Industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT. And it's making buildings clever. It's using digital technology to make decisions. So, for example, this is a smart building, and it says 8 a.m. on Sunday night. Sam's smart building looks up Monday's weather forecast so as to plan energy consumption a day in advance. 8:45 a.m. Sam arrives at work and realizes that his hybrid car is low on electricity. He plugs it in at the building's charging station using an electronic key card for identification. His purchase is automatically deducted from his pay. So this is kind of the staff experience and business experience brought together. 9 a.m. A facial recognition program detects Sam's entry into the building and sends him an SMS alert to remind him about his 10 a.m. meeting. Another thing that I've heard that smart buildings are promising to do, which I'm not going to believe until I see, is that they're going to be able to decide on the best temperature in the building based on people's input. Now, as you know, if you work in offices with air conditioning, I've never seen anyone agreeing on what's the right temperature. So if this is what they can do, worth every penny. The next slide is talking about the business, the bit around the business transformation. So this is an example of Michelin. As you know, Michelin does tires. That's what we know. That's a traditional model. What they've done is, and you see the 3 columns, so there is pre-digital product line, digital product line, and new market segments. So the pre-digital product line is doing tires. What they've now developed is tires with sensors, which basically will tell customers when the tire is being worn out and when it's time to replace it. So this is slightly like, the printer situation when, you think that your printer cartridges can go for another month, but you have to replace them because the chip says so. But it also, it has these information services, which is a piece of software which talks about fuel consumption and how they can reduce fuel consumption and CO2 emissions. So it's a totally new area of work. So it's far removed from tires. It's actually like a piece of software development that they are doing there. But this is how digital market and the digital capabilities have transformed their business. So they started doing something different. Does it make sense? Yeah? Right. So another thing about, as we've touched on, is this focus on the audience. And I think this is one of the, so going back to talking about charities. In my work with charities, what I found most transformational, actually, and most difficult is this focus on audiences. And I think sometimes, I spoke to one colleague, and her first reaction when I said audience focus, she was saying, surely that should be beneficiaries. Which is, she works in development, international development, which clearly is, I can totally see why she thought that, but actually beneficiaries are not the ones who have access to digital technology and can benefit from it. So it's really about identifying where can digital, and I'll talk about this a bit more later, where can digital can bring the most value to your organization and to what you do and to your objectives. So it's not, it's basically thinking about it strategically. Which is what should happen, but it doesn't always. So focusing on the audience, understanding who they are, understanding where they're at when it comes to your issues, when it comes to what you're trying to talk to them about, the change you're trying to make. And this is always a big discussion in organizations because what we are used to do over the years is to tell people what to think and not necessarily talk to them where they are for the fear of dumbing down the content, being inaccurate, or politically incorrect, etc. What's the next one? And the reason, again, so this is going back to that point I was making, the reason why it's so important to focus on audiences is because this is the reality that people we're talking to are exposed to. So Amazon has these leadership principles, has this thing called customer obsession. Leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. All the leaders pay attention to competitors. They obsess over customers. How many of your organizations do this? Anyone? And I think this is the whole point. Although this is Amazon, and people have a number of different issues about that's why on purpose I show this, because whatever we think about this company, this is the reality that everyone else is exposed to. This is the expectation, so it's nothing to do with values. It's to basically how things are, how things work. So again, this is the reality. So what we are used to do over the years is to tell people what to think and not necessarily talk to them where they are for the fear of dumbing down the content and not being inaccurate, or politically incorrect, etc. So it's not, it's basically thinking about it strategically. So still talking about audiences, one of the other areas, so if we're thinking about the audience profile and understanding who the audiences are, mostly in charities, people who own that information is fundraising. So this is like across the board. If I'm talking about small charities, medium charities, large charities, fundraising is always going to have some kind of idea of who they are talking to and who the audience profile is. So they're the first people, they're the best people to start with in terms of who are we actually talking to, so that we understand who the people are. The other reason why it's important to have audience profiles is because then we remove the conversations from my mate down the street said that this is rubbish to based on the audience profile, this is what we think would work, this is what we tested, etc., etc. So we are moving away from anecdotal and personal opinion to actually basing our planning on evidence. The third thing that's really important and that I find is sometimes a challenge is actually planning an audience journey. So a lot of the times, I'm going to use the stairs. A lot of the times, we all focus on this one, which is the landing page, or whatever, or website, or it's the product. And all the energy around planning is focusing on that. So it's all about the report needs to look like this. These are the colors we want to use on the report. This is the font, blah, blah, blah. What is not thought about as much is how people are actually going to get there. Just because it's there, it doesn't mean anyone's going to see it. So the marketing piece is as important, if not more important, as the product. How are people going to see it? And this is where audience profiling is really important, because you need to know who is, you need to know who you want to see this, and then you need to know where they are. And the only way to know where they are is to have these profiles. And when I talk about marketing, that could be anything from face-to-face events, fundraising, leaflets, emails, social media. It could be any of those different things. And we can talk about marketing, but it's usually divided between owned, bought, and earned media. So the channels that you have control over, so that's your website, your email, your database, stuff that you pay for, like Google advertising, banner advertising, that kind of thing. And earned media is stuff, love that you earn. So that is working with bloggers, PR, so everything that you get for free, but you actually have to work it and you have no control over those channels. So the other thing that people don't plan about is like, great, so we've done that, and there's the page, and then that's it. And it's like, yeah, but what's going to happen with those people afterwards? So a lot of the times, they will get a thank you email at best, and that's it. So, or they're going to get a thank you email, and then they're going to get dropped into the usual generic organizational communications. So it's really important to think about, once we recruited these people, what are we going to do with them? What is the journey that we're going to take them on? And I want to clarify, I'm not arguing that you should have 50 different journeys for 50 different entry points. I'm just arguing that probably there should be at least like 2 or 3 steps between them being dropped into generic communications and being exposed to your organization. So it's really important to think about the supported development, like what happens to people once we recruit them. And what's related to that is what do we have to offer to them? So once we've recruited them, for example, they signed a petition, what is the next best action we're offering to them? And this is a totally invented pyramid of engagement that I did just to illustrate my points. By work on developing this with my clients. And the reason why it's a pyramid, are you familiar with this, some of you? Some of you already are. So the reason why it's a pyramid is because at the bottom, the logic is high volume, low level ask. So something that's easy to do, therefore more people will do it. At the top is a high level ask, low volume. So it's harder to do, i.e. there's more investment of time needed, and less people will do it. So basically, it's just creating, the reason why this pyramid of engagement is important is because that's how you plan the journey, that development journey. So once you've recruited someone, and you can recruit someone on any of those levels, what are you going to offer them next? How are you going to engage them next? What offers are you going to make so that they move from one level to the next? And a lot of the times, again, you will see that the journey is kind of worked up to a point of regular gift and then nothing. And actually, a lot of the times, fundraising and campaigning journeys are separate, which means that there is even less to offer to people. So you can either just give money or you can just take actions. There's not necessarily a combination of the two. So it's worth thinking about something that is action-focused rather than siloed within the teams that exist in organizations. So just coming to the end, explaining why digital transformation rather than anything else. What is transformational about digital transformation? So I'll give you one example. This is something I was working on with a client in the past year. So I was employed to do an email review. They basically said, it sounds like email, the way our email is working doesn't really make sense. Can you please have a look at it? Which I did. And immediately what I found is that how email was managed was siloed. So it was all based on this team owns this list and this is what they're sending out. This team's own this list and this is what they're sending out. So the structure of the email platform totally didn't make sense. But then I also realized that the way data was managed was slightly shocking. So apart from lack of compliance, there was really no exclusion. So they were basically just blanket emailing everyone on their list, regardless of whether they unsubscribed or not, etc. So thankfully, the email system would stop those emails going through. But the problem is that they didn't even have that kind of awareness. So what came out of that is that actually we started off with email review, where we ended up is saying, well, actually, there is an issue with data compliance and data processes. There's an issue with the fact that the whole thing needs to be audience-centric, and it's not. It's based on broadcast and absolutely no understanding of who are you sending this stuff to. There is no planning, so people are just sending stuff out without any consultation across the board. So there needs to be some planning. And it wasn't clear, and the roles and responsibilities were not clear, so there was not kind of an oversight of this process. So basically, we started off with something very, very simple on the face of it, and we ended up with a year-long program, which actually changed all these different things. So putting in a bigger context this is what I call the strategy house, and some people in this audience will be familiar with this. And it's just trying to illustrate. I've heard a number of times that people say, we do have a digital strategy, but I don't really understand how it fits with our overall strategy. Therefore, digital strategy is useless, or it doesn't make sense. And my response to that, well, it's a wrong digital strategy then, if you don't know how it fits within the overall strategy. It's really important that it does. So whatever you're doing in digital terms needs to be clear about how is it contributing to organizational vision. So it needs to be put in very simple terms. These are the areas. So the strategies are always big. The objectives, there's always many of them. It's about finding where can digital bring the best value to the organization. As you know, there is nothing you can't do with digital. There's loads. Everything is possible. But everyone has limited resources, both technical and human. So you do need to prioritize. And that is where this digital vision bit comes in. So it's really important that the digital vision explains what the purpose of digital is for your organization. How is digital going to contribute to your organizational objectives? Brand, I didn't mention that, but actually it's a really important one. In the olden days, before you were all born, when Twitter just started in the UK, we all got onto it, like a few of us who were in the sector, totally didn't know what we were doing. We were just kind of trying it out because it was unclear. This was 2007, so it's like unclear what the hell do you do with Twitter. And what you could notice is that people with a very, very traditional conservative brand were being nice and useful on Twitter. So totally this doesn't make sense. So the reason I'm telling you this anecdote is because brand is really important to inform what your tone and style is on in digital channels. So what you how are you representing your organization in digital? What is your digital brand? And then at the bottom you will notice that this relates to the previous slide, but these are the building blocks of any digital strategy. So whatever you decide your purpose is, you need to figure out what does that mean for planning and processes. So what change do you need to create there in order to be able to deliver on the vision, digital vision? What kind of training and people and staffing and skills you need, and what kind of technology and data processes you need. So just to illustrate, I've used the Friends of the Earth strategy. This is the new one. So yeah, now you get a special preview. So there is it's really nicely done, like on a one page. But I've kind of summarized it. So if by 2030 the next generation will enjoy an environment that's getting better, a safer climate, flourishing nature, and healthy air, water, and food, and then there is something about the means of how we are going to get there as an organization, how Friends of the Earth are going to get there. Supporting and enabling a diverse, resilient network of people, transforming the environment, and protect our ability to continue supporting transformational change. I've pulled these two out because they are clearly where digital can. So obviously this is my take on it. I didn't consult Tom or anyone, but the thinking behind there is that these two are clearly where digital can provide huge value and can definitely help the organization get there. And then the brand stuff, which again I pulled out from that paper, which might not be precise, but there is this interesting idea about amplifying friends in Friends of the Earth. So this is how you're going to do it. This is the feeling and the brand that you're creating in the digital space in order to do that. So those are just some kind of examples, and you can kind of drill down and for your own just to show you can do this for your own organizations as well. I think that's it. So thank you, and if you have any questions, now is the time.
We'll cover them, don't worry. Thank you, Brani, much appreciated. I've managed to get the other microphone to work, place the batteries, I think. Cool. So, I made another list because lots of things to say. First thing I wanted to do is something I've not tried before, but if it works, I'll do it next time we do a talk. So there's a bunch of people who are joining us remotely, either working from home or other Friends of the Earth offices, who you can't see. And they probably can't see you because there's a little camera up there, or a tiny thing in the middle of their screen. They can't actually see us. But I thought it'd be nice to say hello to each other. So everyone who's on link, could you come off mute or unmute yourselves? I'm going to give you about 3 seconds to do it. Okay, and after 3, if you could just all say hello, please. 1, 2, 3.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, it's working so far. So folks in the room, could you say hello back to the people on link who you can't see? 1, 2, 3. Did that work? People on link?
They were a bit quiet.
Yeah. Okay, it wasn't a complete failure. I'll do that one next time.
You were better, Tom.
Yeah, you guys win. So we've got quite a bit of time. I've lost my phone, so let me get a check at the time. We've got a bit of time for Q&A. The way I thought this might work is I'm sure there's going to be questions for Branislava, but I didn't want to feel like you had to answer them all, because I thought there's probably a lot of expertise and skills in this room and out there in the virtual space who might be able to answer it. So have you got a preference about taking questions in 3s or 1s? What works best? Should we try individually?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll two scatty people want to do questions in ones. So we'll do individual questions. I'm going to go to folks on link first. Ian's looking after link. No one's got a question on link. All right. Well, link, I'll come back to you. Folks in the room, anybody got a question? Brilliant. I shall come to you. It will be useful when you're asking a question if you could just tell us who you are. If you're not working at Friends of the Earth, your role in the organisation or group you work for, that'd be great.
Hi everybody, my name's Sarah. I'm not currently working but have previously worked in digital editorial roles for a variety of NGOs. Thank you very much for a very useful presentation. My question to you and to other people in the room is to come back to your first question about what is digital transformation. I think my answer is probably something along the lines of it's an ongoing theme of enabling people to communicate as effectively as possible to achieve the change that the organisation is seeking to achieve. But I think the challenge that I've come across is to do with the people part of that, and the intersection of digital transformation and organisational transformation. So I'm interested if anyone's got any particular experience that they'd like to share about what works well when trying to ensure that digital does come first. Because I think when organisations are transforming, it's not necessarily the people leading that transformation that have an awareness or an involvement that would enable them to see how digital transformation can come first and can achieve what I've forgotten your words, can have the most value. So that's my long-winded question.
Oh, well, I'd be interested to hear what other people say, but I just wanted to kind of jump in with my first reaction to something, or rather how I'm hearing what you're saying. One of the main things about digital transformation, I think, is people feel the digital transformation, we're doing it for digital transformation's sake. And I think it's being very clear why we're doing it, and we are suggesting that it's being done by the organization, not because we're keen on digital and we're excited about it and it's such an exciting time and all that, which clearly we are. But it is actually because we really truly believe that there is a change, that this change can actually help us bring about the change that we want to see in the world. So it's really important to always embed what you're doing in the organizational strategy. I'm currently working with a client, and we've kind of gone through the process of doing the strategic bit and then implementation. So what I've realized is that they kind of lost the bit of why we're doing it. So now every piece of communications that we have starts with the reason why we're doing this is because this is what we're trying to do in our strategy, and this is how this helps us. So you constantly have to reiterate that. The other thing about digital transformation, then I'll shut up, is actually what Friends of the Earth is doing now, this type of process where you give people opportunity and you spend some time talking about it and thinking about it, so that it just doesn't look like this huge, unknown, scary, nebulous thing that everyone's banging on about and use really. So for example, some of the things again I'm doing with my clients is like sessions on how to use Twitter, because that's what people really want to understand, or this is how Google ads work, because people feel those things like, why do we need a social media person? Isn't that something that takes 2 minutes to do it? So, well, if I explain to you what we need to go through to do it, then you're going to realize it's not like that. So it's just kind of raising a bit, releasing people from the fear of it, and just explaining, bringing people along with you. And the third thing is whatever kind of digital transformation process or strategy you're doing, you need to do it with the organization rather than to the organization. And that is something that I've noticed organizations have done in the past. I don't think it's happening that much anymore. Does anyone else want to share?
If not, let's take a question from the virtual world. Ian, can you pick one? Cool. Simon first.
Yeah, hi, Hannah. One of the big things for...
You have to tell us who you are.
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Simon Bones. I'm the regional campaigner for Yorkshire and the Humber and the North East. A lot of my time is spent actually in more personal relationships, probably with a lot of the people who are in that kind of top triangle of your kind of pyramid of engagement, if that's the right word. What I'd be very keen to get insights into is how we best augment our digital strategy with that kind of personal offline relationship building. I think we kind of talk a lot about being digital first. I think the question is, should we be relationship first?
So my answer to that is, the answer to that question really depends on your strategy. So if you're talking about, and a lot of the organizations I have contacts with are talking about building a movement. If you're going to build a movement, going with a kind of face-to-face relationship is going to take you that far. which is where kind of going hand in hand, both face-to-face activism as well as online activism works together. And also, so when it comes to personal relationships, or rather face-to-face relationships, this also applies to, for example, major donors. The best value is the face-to-face relationship. Digital is never going to be better than that. You can't better that. But what digital can do is facilitate and support that kind of relationship. So, for example, I know that Greenpeace has Greenwire, which is their online activist platform. So that is where I don't know if you have the same, but so that is where activists can kind of exchange information and organize, etc., etc. So that is a perfect example where digital contributes to a kind of organizing objective, which goes both offline and online. And just the thought you were talking about, it is just a kind of difference in language, but I'm saying audience-centric, you're saying relationship-centric, which to me, actually, when you think about it, it's the same thing. It's basically thinking about how can we build relationships with people.
Anyone else want to come in on that point? Simon, do you want to comment back? Any more thoughts?
No, I think thank you for that. It's really interesting. I think I agree. It is that kind of relationship is about the audience, and it's, I think, potentially building the relationships with the most effective and useful parts of the audience as well.
Cool, thank you. Is it Phil? Phil, you're next.
Hi, my name's Phil Burrows. I'm a member of the community activism team. We try and help support the different local groups that we have all around the country. I just want to say I definitely agree with Simon's question. That was actually part of the question I was going to ask, and Simon said it a lot better than I could have, so thank you, Simon. The other kind of half of the question that jumps out at me, and I was just wondering if you had any kind of advice or thoughts on the matter, is when you're looking at kind of data. So you mentioned we want to move beyond the anecdotal to kind of the large data set, I guess, is the best way that I can think to say it. When you're doing that, that large data set is obviously going to, or that methodology, that way of making decisions is really going to skew it in favor of, in my perception maybe, skew it in favor of digital online actions, not the face-to-face, not the offline, not the people that are out working on the ground, who then kind of get lost in that whole massive data set, namely possibly just because we don't have a way of actually capturing really effectively what's going on down there and what everybody else is doing, and they're not really telling us what they're doing and everything like that, whereas everything that happens online is really easy to capture and everything. So I don't know, is there a way to rectify that? Or yeah, I don't know, sorry, it's a pretty rambling question.
No, I understand. I totally understand what you're asking. I think when I'm talking about, there are different ways of identifying your audiences. So the first step always is to look at the data you have about your current audience and try to understand, to make conclusions from that, and then try and go out and find more of the same, because they're most likely to be successfully recruited to your cause. The other areas, so the what you're talking about, and I'm going to use the word niche just because that means smaller audiences. I would never argue, and I don't think anyone would argue, that you're going to tailor your communications to the lowest common denominator or to the biggest group of people. It's more about understanding where all your different segments of audiences are, what their profiles are, and then tailoring communications to them. So your very active small group of people. You might not have the data about them, which is a shame, and that is one of the big transformational pieces around digital. Why they're not reporting? I bet you it's because it's damn difficult to do so. So again, one of my clients, volunteer expenses. It sounds like an absolute nightmare for poor volunteers to do it. So of course they're not getting clear data about what volunteers are doing on a day-to-day basis. So there is actually something about why don't you have better data about what people are doing. Another client is organizing events and they have no clue if people came to an event or not. So they know that they applied to come, but they don't know if they actually did come. So those are all the transformational bits about the business that we were looking at before. So you definitely should look into that. In the absence of those, there are old marketing techniques of doing focus groups and testing of messaging and products and campaign stuff. One of the things that is definitely really useful that kind of brings all of this together is to have kind of campaign narratives which go from top line on that campaign to more detailed things, which basically then helps you formulate the messages for different audiences. So obviously the very highly engaged or your MPs or people in companies that you're trying to lobby will get nitty-gritty, detailed technical information, while people at the top will get the top bits, and then will be given opportunity to drill down deeper if they want to. So it's all about understanding that journey. So the reason why you need an audience profile is to understand why they're going to come across the piece of communication that you're developing, and then once you know that you're going to capture them and they're going to see the piece of communication you're developing, then you need to think about what you're going to do with them next. So that's why it's important to understand who the audience is, and that doesn't mean that it all needs to be the same. You still have segmentation within that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I will take that one as a yes. Let's come back to the room. Anybody got questions or points they'd like to raise? Got one in front.
Hi, I'm Swati. I used to work in the whole digital media team at Greenpeace and later at the Rules. And I've recently just finished a master's in digital media and culture. So my question was, what do you think, or what are the challenges, or is the single biggest challenge when it comes to digital transformation, especially in organizations which have been very grassroots and have traditional hierarchies like campaigners and departments, and they're set in their way. So what do you think is the challenge there, bringing in digital transformation?
I think the biggest challenge is calling it digital transformation, because that sounds really scary. So that's the first thing. Don't call it digital transformation. And I actually think the best way to get in is to start talking about audiences and to try to get the organization, the teams to plan with audiences in mind. So it's actually not digital first, it's audience first. And that looks much less threatening. And it can start small. So one example is you can start if there is a big annual thing your organization does. Usually it's something around Christmas, let's say. That is the time when you say we're going to do this integrated campaign, where everyone gets together around one message, around one creative. And we plan together with the audience in mind, so bearing in mind who are we trying to access and understand, developing profiles, etc. Once people go through that process once and realize it's not that painful, it's much easier to do it again. So that would be and then everything else comes out of that, because once you start looking at audiences, then you realize, as we just heard, that your data is not very good quality. Then you realize that your database is from the 80s and it's actually not set up to deal with digital data, and that you actually need to look into that. Then you realize that you haven't got the right roles, and that people who should be taking care of the database can't, etc. So there's kind of loads of different. So you just take it step by step. And then another thing is definitely not quick. It's going to take 3 to 5 years really to get through the whole process.
So we got it right by not calling it digital transformation of Friends of the Earth then. We've done first step, tick. Okay. We've probably got time for one more question, if there is one. We have one.
Hi, I'm Emma from Macmillan, a digital editor for campaigns. So I'm interested in knowing about how you'd recommend about choosing a digital channel as like the primary communication route for your supporters. So I think traditionally we've sort of fallen into using email as the main way, but I think there's so many out there that people are ignoring them. And is that really the most effective way we want to send our message? And just how you might decide which channel to use. Like web, like we want to get them back to the web pages because you've got the context of everything else there. And social media doesn't really allow you to give the detail. So what are your thoughts on that?
So your question goes really across 2 areas. One is content and one is channel. So where you get... So just to kind of just to be totally honest, I'm the really wrong person to ask about email, because I champion email for the past. I still think it's the best driver of quality traffic to people's websites, and you can segment it, you can tailor it, you can target it really well, and if you do all those things, you will get very good open rates and very good conversion rates, i.e. people clicking and going to where you want them to go. You can also design journeys and take them on the journey through it. Yes, you're right, there's loads of it out there, which is why it's really important that it's done with thought rather than just churning them out, which does happen sometimes. So when it comes to channels, it's really, I mean, this if you talking about your current audiences, it's really about looking at your stats and understanding where the traffic's coming from. So useful things to look at is keywords that people are using to come to your pages. So what do they say? Because most of the time people just put stuff in Google and that's how they land on people's websites. More often than not, people are searching for brand names, and especially with Macmillan, that would be the case. The other thing to look at is the performance of your email lists, and this is where segmentation is really important, because if you have an email of list of 100,000 people, obviously it's not gonna have very good performance figures, because you're slamming in together people who are active with people who have been on the list for like 5 years and are not opening emails at all. So it's really important to separate actives from inactives, so to actually understand which groups in that list are actually active, which groups in that list are slightly tired, and which groups. So some rules of thumb is if people haven't opened an email for 2 years or older, actually I would say a year, they probably need reactivation. So you kind of go through the reactivation process where you try to liven them, to ask them certain questions to understand why they're not engaging, and then remove them from the list or keep them if they want to be kept on it. So that's basically what the way of making email more effective. I think a lot of the organizations have gone to building email lists and then just bombarding them with the content without necessarily thinking through who they are emailing. So again, it's thinking. So based on your stats, you can also, I actually know you have fairly sophisticated systems, so you could probably mix up the performance data from email with whatever is on your database to understand a bit more the profile of the people and create segments. So sometimes for campaigns especially, you don't necessarily need loads of people, you just need the right people to react. So that could be the way. And then I was saying the other thing is around content, and that is what level. So you're talking about the detailed information is on the pages, and social media doesn't necessarily allow for that. That depends what the ask is, because as we were saying, our attention span is is lower than that of a goldfish. So social media is there to help people make a decision to investigate further, but sometimes you might want to be able to just make people make a decision in those 7 seconds that they're going to take action if that's what you want. So it's just kind of choosing the right channel for the right action and content.
Thank you, Branislava. We timed it perfectly because it's coming up to 2 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap it. Do you need to head off straight away? Okay, so Brani can hang around if anybody wants an individual chat with her. I'm going to wrap this up because it's coming up to 2 o'clock. There's a couple of things I need to do. First of all, go over and click a slide. Okay. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Branislava, for coming to give us a wonderful talk. Lots of food for thought. Can we do a quick round of applause, please? Cool. So the only thing I need to say before I clock off is that the next one of these talks is next month on Monday the 14th of November, where we're going to have Julius Honor coming in and Ian Goggin, who's sitting over there, running a session on Slack. Can we say goodbye to internal email? We've done this especially for Brani because she loves Slack. She doesn't like Slack. For those of you who've come in to join us today, thank you for coming. You're welcome to come to that one if you want to. I'm going to attempt to see if I can make it work virtually as well for people outside of the Friends of the Earth bubble. So I'll send stuff around the Digital Charities group and the ECF list as well on that one. But thank you very much for coming.